Evening speakers and listeners, my name is Richard, and this video is a little out of the ordinary because there were some circumstances that came up with the recording of last session, of the last D&D session, that basically ruined the audio for it. And by that I mean OBS, probably due to an update, decided to think that my mic was my camera, thus making me a mute DM the entire time through. So basically the whole session is just the players talking to one another and then me kind of miming at them and them responding to me. So as much as the concept of a silent DM is intriguing, I don't think it particularly makes for good watching. So this video is specifically going to be me recapping the key moments from the session so that you guys don't miss out on what's happening. And considering that I've been meaning to make a video that's talking about my kind of plans for the channel, and I've also been wanting to sort of like, brief people on some of the stuff that was missed regarding the actual story thus far of Plucking the Dragon's Teeth, I figure that this is just going to be a overall sort of video that's going to kind of cover all the bases. So going forward, let's talk about the most exciting part of this, where it's the other planned videos that I have going up, because I very much wanted to have some videos going on where they delve into the lore of the world that I'm running the game in, which is my homebrew world that I've been calling Bloodline Chronicles, that is set inside the continent of Tyria, that and whatnot. And I've been writing a lot. I've recently just got a lore document out that's 14 pages, all about the different leaders and sort of eras of the Atarashi principalities. So a lot of stuff to look into, and I plan on there being more. I also plan on creating some Meet the Character videos, which will specifically take the different characters from this game that I'm putting out, and have essentially solo one-shots with the players, which will actually be all about specific key moments of the character's background and sort of like storyline where sort of like things kicked off. Yeah, along those lines, I'm also planning on putting out, I'm starting to do streams, by streams, pre-recorded streams, of indie games that I'm hoping to kind of get together and produce there, because I feel like there's a lot of very interesting indie games that I also really want to sort of put out there. And the first one is going to be, cross my fingers, the first one is going to be Nyx, which is a game all set inside of the dream world that's very interesting, kind of wild rules. You choose your spells based upon what planet sign you're born under, and your astrological symbol is arts. It's crazy. You can be a machine elf that doesn't actually have a body, and it's crazy, but it seems super evocative and creative, and I feel like it's a very interesting space to play off of that will be very different than the game that I'm producing thus far with Plucking the Dragon's Teeth. So, with all of that, if any of that sounds nifty to you, I'm going to hit you up with the obligatory YouTube stuff, with the subscribe and other YouTube buttons that's going on here. Before we get into the sort of nitty-gritty of like the purpose of this video, also, if you have any comments or ideas, I'd love to read them inside the comments. And honestly, if there's ever a moment inside of any of the videos that you particularly enjoy and whatnot, it would be super helpful if you actually just kind of made a note of that, popped a comment down there, and honestly, it would help me sort of, the players would appreciate it, I'd appreciate it, and, it would all be just sort of a nice thing to do to help a small channel out. So I'll see you when we get into the history, well, the history of the game, and kind of catching you up with everything that you're going to miss out on. So, what I'm going to be breaking down is all of the story that happened before I even started recording videos for the channel. This is as well as stuff that hasn't even happened inside of, like, game in particular. This is all background information, because I kind of realized that I'm throwing you in the middle of a storyline, which didn't really have a lot of context, so this is your context. Alright, the party particularly starts in Rainholm, which is far to the north along the eastern coast in the shadow of the demon spines of the Adarashi Principality, where Glimwell, who is a noble among the House of White, commissioned the group to sort of escort her through the north as a sort of, like, accepted sort of adventure and almost sort of like strange, violent vacation, which is pseudo-common among the House of White, but still. This particularly started with Ashy and Emmy, whom both came from the islands and were needing to sort of make as much distance as possible due to varying circumstances with their family, Emmy being part of the House of Blue, and Ashy being part of the Dissarai family, which is one of the Kenku crime families. Yes, there are Kenku crime families. This is why I want to do lore videos for my world. Moving forward, as they moved west towards the Ganende Woods, which is the Fey Woods and whatnot, they happened to meet up with Durist and Lucy. Durist, who is a researcher from Stratavesk, the greatest Mages Academy across Tyria, debatable by some, but most agree, and Lucy, whom picked up a strange axe inside the Fey Woods that, like, fundamentally changed her life, and she was looking for answers relating to that, and has been less subtly as thing goes on, being guided by it inside of a strange way. So she also looked for answers. So the group was essentially formed up inside of this manor, and Glim wanted to make as much distance away from Rainholm as possible because her noble family were incredibly stifling to her, and just wanted to sort of escape that as best as possible. This meant that they crossed over at Sancho's Crossing into the Lugu Valley, and eventually stopped at the small town of Chenwu. That's only a little bit off of the main road. There, they would learn that there were bandits inside of the woods, making it making it dangerous for the locals to go out hunting and, you know, provide for themselves inside of some manner. So, considering that this group had dealt with bandits, and yes, I did bang my elbow a little bit back, I'm just kind of powering through, considering that this group had dealt with bandits before, up inside the Northlands, also, I believe, some ogres? Not necessarily certain. They continued this sort of trend, and went out into the woods to try and deal with these bandits, as, you know, heroes do, only to find that the bandits were intentionally trying to keep the locals away due to them actually being part of a, that this is all a dig site for a sort of mysterious tunnel that had occurred due to some recent earthquakes. This specific dig site and excavation process was being funded by the Vault Breakers secretly, and they presumed that this was a dragon vault. So in this world, there were monsters that were eventually banished, and the Adarashi Principalities were where the dragons ruled. So the dragons, everyone presumed, left behind some great vaults of knowledge and power and wealth that nobody has been able to find ever since the sort of banishing has occurred. So this is a big deal. The problem is that anyone that goes into those tunnels didn't ever come out. So currently they are short-staffed at the dig site and also not very motivated to go down in there. But people that are motivated to do that are adventurers. So they cleared out the entire bandit site, except for one individual that provided them a lot of information. That was a sort of a wizard that sort of just needed the money and whatnot, who was an enchanter, I believe. Sort of like one of those like non-critical characters that cause a whole bunch of stuff, but it's minor. They go into these tunnels, they being the party, go into these tunnels, and they find that inside of them are ancient ghouls from the Age of the Dragons that have been preserved and been just living inside of these tunnels, now voraciously hungry, still wearing tattered robes and rusted metal amulets from back inside of those days. Which, once they clear them out, with Ashy nearly being knocked out and dragged into some mysterious tunnel to probably be consumed, they find their way to the Vault of Razimira. Razimira being the Lord of the Silver Dragon, well, the Queen of the Silver Dragons. Upon going into this vault and finding access to it, they uncover all the different experimentation that Razimira was trying to do in an attempt to shift herself momentarily, for a fraction of a second, out of this timeline to avoid the banishing. That she had, since she was essentially a spy master of sorts, she had knowledge that the banishing was coming before any of the other dragons, but she was the only one who made particular preparations and attempts to try and avoid it. So all of these experimentations on various animals and objects and people all were just sort of in a time capsule, literally, down inside of this vault. The party eventually collapses the vault and takes in none of the sort of items that were created out of this, or really partakes in a lot of the knowledge, per se, except for Ashy, who smuggled out a robotic cat, because Durist was adamant that this draconic magic was aberrant and dangerous, which I'm gonna say as a DM, yeah, kinda. It definitely could be. However, they collapse the vault. There's no longer any danger from that, and this is sort of where we sort of left off before the Chenwu Fair that I believe is up on there. So now you're all caught up. So there you go. I'm sure that provided more questions than it gave answers, but here you are. I feel vindicated, and that's really what matters. And now we're going to move on to the session recap. To be the bulk of the video, I'd presume, because I'm having to condense 4-ish hours down into something digestible, which, as much as I'm going to do my best to do that, it takes a little bit. Not to say that this session was incredibly dense in terms of, like, important story thematic elements that were going on here, but still, there's a lot that happened because, it's a proper investigation that occurred, and still, don't want to devalue the actions of anyone that happens here because it was a kind of wild session either way. So, the party starts off where they ended off, in the rye fields nearby the Green Valley Brewery, after Glenwell had this very powerful sort of speech that was warning the party about how they were getting to, like, very dangerous territories, and they need to be careful with who they spoke to and what information they particularly provided. after that had occurred, they saw some ash in the wind, and Ashi and Emmy would investigate and eventually find a burnt patch inside of the rye that had a sort of chemical smell to it, as well as blood nearby on the various rye stalks that were around there. But nothing really guiding them, just sort of more indication that something happened out here and it was something violent. Lucy, whose patron, Orlaith Rin, has been very active and in a way that she's not used to having, opted to sort of let her take the wheel for a little bit and have Orlaith Rin guide her along, which served to have her find 2 sets of footprints inside the rye, along with more blood. These footprints led out to where presumably the fight ended, and then back to the Green Valley Brewery. This is a fairly obvious assumption that Cammy, the wayward werewolf, I'm sorry, this tea that I had is just starting to kick off, so I'm gonna focus. Cammy, who is the daughter of the Glanville Brewery head, was presumably this wayward werewolf that was part of this fight. And everyone basically assumed that it's like, well, she's dead. What can we do about this? And Lucy, who's, I feel kind of emboldened by her patron, made a very strong statement that it's like, about abandoning her, and if it was one of the group, would it be the same sort of idea? And this sort of recontextualized things for everyone, as well as prompted them to sort of, like, move forward. Which, as a DM, I am incredibly thankful for. Yes. So, Lucy would kind of continue this sort of, like, trend, being very, very focused on this, and would kind of beeline past the guards that would kind of hamper the rest of the group with a little bit of a conversation and whatnot, and would allow Orlaith Rin even more control, specifically stating that it's like, I want Orlaith Rin to take control, which put her into a trance-like state where she barely had connection to her senses, in terms of, like, her eyesight completely narrowed in, and her hearing made everything sound like it was distant, eventually having her walk past the guards totally uncaring about that and collapse beside the cellar at the manor house. So, I believe it's the Sebastian Manor House. Look at me remembering the family names. Right, so with that happening, the guards are all confused about what's happening, and the group kind of shuffles by and whatnot. Ashi quickly pops open the lock to the wine cellar, which they're taking as definitely the direction that they need to go after the sort of divine direction of from Lucy. And Ashi and Emmy zip down to the wine cellars like good rogues, and Lucy, Glimwell, and Jesse would stay above to both check on Lucy, as well as sort of dissuade any sort of interference that would be happening, which would come along pretty quickly because the guards would come over, asking if they have permission to the wine cellar and what was happening with Lucy and, like, all this sort of thing. And Glim would respond with a very adamant, yes, we do have permission from the Lord, in such a way that her nobility kind of shined through, and they decided it wasn't good to get in an argument with her, who's obviously had some highborn standing, and had previously entered into the manor, supposedly by the invitation of Quincy Sebastien. So, with the guards out of the way, Emmy and Ashi both head down into wine cellar and start checking out the place to try and find anything that's happening. And it looks like a well-tended wine cellar. That's, you know, functional. A personal wine cellar, not for, like, all this sort of different stuff. This is for the family in particular, which meant that Ashy was able to case the joint and find the most expensive wine that she very quickly pocketed. Not too long after, the steward that they met entering the Green Valley Brewery would show up on the premises and would ask Glim more directly about what they were doing in the wine cellar, whether they had permission to go in there, and sort of making a kind of a big huff about it. This didn't put Glimwell on his side. In fact, when she gave him the right of way to go check down in the wine cellar, she opted to push him. Now, I don't know if you know stewards, but they are not really adept at, you know, taking any sort of physical jostling. So this guy promptly fell down the stairs and smashed his face on the L-shaped stair wall that's down there and broke his nose, which led to a huge commotion that happened there. And I don't want to put it down that Glimwell was actively hostile. This was meant to be which we discussed, this was a commonality among the northern, how to act towards northern servants and whatnot, that they need to be a little bit more hardy and whatnot, but I digress. This would then prompt the... Ooh, I'm a little low on the list. Yes, the steward's name is Linus, by the way. I have names for my NPCs. This, specifically, the commotion from now the howling Linus, the steward, prompted a mysterious woman to come out of an uninvestigated corner of the cellar that would look at the door to investigate what was happening, not seeing the disguised rogues or Ashy, who decided to go out and pop Linus's nose back into place, prompting even more hysterical sobbing. But the mysterious woman wouldn't see Emmy, and Emmy would notice her check the door, speak into her hand, as if messaging someone, hint, hint, and would head back into the corner and disappear. Not long after, Quincy, the son of, I believe, William Sebastien? I could check it out. The son of the head of the Green Valley Brewery, would arrive on the scene and make a very adamant statement about the injury of his servants, as well as their unprompted actions of going into the wine cellar. And after Glim essentially playing a pedantic game of words, Quincy would then order the guards over and then leave the premises. The guards, during this delay that would occur, during this delay, everyone filed in to the cellar minus Jesse, who opted to stay behind to delay and set up anything that was, like, not set up, but delay the guards and whatnot, giving them enough time to do what they needed to do. With this in mind, during this time, the rogues, again being the rogues that they are, investigated that corner and found a secret lever, which dispelled the illusion that was keeping a door hidden. And having been able to get into that door without triggering the alarm that was there, that would be, I believe, Emmy, Ashy, and Lucy. Yes, Emmy, Ashy, and Lucy would head down into this hidden extra space inside the cellar. Durst wasn't here at this session, and unfortunately, I'm sure you'd have many opinions about this. And Glimwell would opt to stay behind after having invisibility cast on her. So Jessie is brought down into the cellar, having no idea where the rest of the group is, actually, very truthfully. And what Glimwell opts to do is throw a bottle of wine beside one guard's head to startle them, then come out of invisibility with Draconic Fear, causing two of the guards to run, and then between Jessie, actually, basically only sort of Glimwell. Jessie rolled a 1 on her attack. Through Glimwell, was able to knock out the other two guards, tie them up poorly, and put a barrel over top of their head, as you do. Then the rest of the group filed into the other side of the cellar before any extra guards would arrive, essentially disappearing. Let me scroll down my notes, because there are a lot of them. Once all of the group enters the... Ah, yes. So now all of the group is on the other side of this invisible barrier, as well as this old door. And they're able to sort of take in their surroundings, finally, rather than having all of this sort of, like, action that's happening. And the place is filled with this sort of, like, dank, stagnant air that is so different than the other wine cellar. It's like this place is older and just been through it's just been entirely disused, almost like forgotten and whatnot. The other smell that's very apparent is the sort of like acrid smell that they very quickly find out is coming from a tarp that's strung up from the ceiling that has obviously something large inside of it, as well as a pooling of dark red liquid. What could it be? That is occurring through it. Not dripping through or whatnot, but very apparently there. The party, however, is more interested in the door very nearby to where they are currently. And Ashy is able to sort of place her hands and have her sensitive rogue fingers sort of tell there's like a heat on the other side, as well as the door having swelled somewhat due to the sort of humidity and the amount of like different sort of chemical stuff that would happen on the other side. And I believe I described the scent that she's picking up as something akin to a tannery that she used to spend some time around back in Rainholm. So she gets a pretty good idea about what's happening inside of there. The group is fairly well stealthed, other than Jessie, who's wearing heavy armor, as a paladin would, and steps a little heavy, prompting the sort of light sounds coming from in there to stop. The group very quickly, well, the party very quickly bursts into the door, opens the door, and starts looking through the place to try and find the individual that, when they come inside, is not there. And there's a few points of interest that the group sort of fans out to go to. Lucy, in particular, sees that there are plants over on the far side of the room, and heading over to investigate those, she finds a clawed finger inside of the dirt for it, and decides to tell no one and just pockets it. Warlocks. Glim moves towards these 4 vats that are inside of the middle, they're in the middle of the room, and gets close enough to take a whiff out of one of them, and is doubled over gagging because of it. These are very potent alchemical sort of concoctions that are being made here. Ashley would kind of breeze by the first table that has some notes on it, as well as the shelf that would have various potions and books and whatnot, and eventually finds herself in the back right corner of the room, and where there's a table, and is able to hear the sort of panicked breathing of someone who is underneath it, but invisible. So she, through her telepathic link, being a side blade, opts to walk away, seeing if that might prompt some response from this individual. And since this information has been passed out through the group, through the telepathic link, Emmy decides to be a little bit more hands-on, in particular opting to shocking grasp this individual underneath the table, which misses. But the panicked yelp is enough for Ashy to respond, and with a very high attack roll, aim and shoot and basically go, well, if the sound is here, the throat is here, and connect impeccably onto the throat of this individual. Not killing them, but obviously hurting them greatly, because this individual person would smash a potion or vial onto the ground, which created this fog cloud that filled most, like, a quarter of the room, pretty much. And this would presume to help with her escape. As she ran out of the clouds, though, there was a slight parting that Lucy and Glimwell, who were outside of the clouds, were able to see. Lucy, ever quick to engage in vandalism, opted to jump on top of some of the casks that were nearby, bring her axe down, and also cast Green Flame Blade to try to explode the barrels in such a way that it would hit the invisible person, or the contents of the barrels would splash onto them and they could be seen. This ended up with the axe lodging into the wood, but then the flame jumping over to one of these barrels, which held alchemical concoctions, essentially like halfway made potions and whatnot, which activated very aggressively to the sudden heat from this magic, and exploded. This absolutely covered the invisible individual with this very caustic concoction, causing her to essentially melt in front of them, as well as Emmy somewhat, who was able to slightly avoid some of the blast, but she was trying to head off this mysterious invisible woman, at the pass before she could actually get out the door. So this left the party with a lot of questions as to what was going on, because this woman, whom would have probably provided some information, is very dead, extremely deceased. And to make matters worse, such a loud bang prompted Jesse to look inside and say, what the hell's happening? Only to then hear the barking of hunting hounds further into the basement. But they don't know what that necessarily heralds. So, that was the full recap. As I was saying, it was a pretty good chunk of events there, and I wish I can give you the videos, because as you know, my players are very, very good with their little nuanced sort of takes on things, and all the little jokes and sort of fun time that we have, and I just realized I did this with my headphones on, and I didn't want to do that, but whatever, they're nice headphones. Who cares? I wear headphones. It happens. But yes, so this was the recap. If you enjoyed this, love to see a like, love to see a comment. If you enjoyed it enough, please let me know, because I'll start doing these as recaps for every one of the sessions before I put out all the different sort of videos, as a sort of like last time on plucking the dragon's teeth sort of vibe that's going on there, because you know, once you get into the practice of doing them, it's not the worst thing. So thank you all for watching. I appreciate it, and I hope to see you next time. And remember, just be your best self, because it's all you can ever ask of yourself, and all anyone can ever ask of you. Okay, bye.